Welcome to Post-Burnout.com interviews. My name is Aaron Kavanagh and I'm the website's founder and editor-in-chief. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. Our interviews are mainly recorded to be transcribed, but every now and again we release the audio in a series we call Post-Burnout.com interviews. If you enjoy what we do, be sure to subscribe. In this edition of Post-Burnout.com interviews, we speak with Daniel, the frontman for the Irish metal and hard rock band Riserfall. He talks about the Irish metal scene, forming the band, getting turned on to classic rock albums as a kid, the band's new single Claim the Kingdom, the lack of metal festivals in Ireland, and more.
Hello.
Hey Daniel, how's it going?
How are you keeping, Aaron? How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. I won't take up too much of your time. I'll just add a few questions to ask.
Nice.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually just sort of the formation of the band. Like, how did you guys kind of get together?
So it's been a process getting together, finding the right people for the right positions in the band. We've gone through like so many personnel changes, I'm at the age where like everybody's priorities are constantly shifting. And obviously, you know yourself, like being a musician it's like having a second full-time job at the best of times. So, right now, we have guys there who are, lifelong musicians dedicated to the craft. They've been in multiple bands and projects before. And we all just kind of gradually found our way together, for this particular, project. It's been a blast with them. Some of them I've known my entire adult life. Others kind of only I came across them maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And even recently this year, we've had the addition of our rhythm guitarist, and now lead guitarist, Dan, who, has been a wonderful addition to the team. So yeah, it's been a journey getting together.
Were you involved in projects yourself or is this kind of like one of your first bands, or like what's your kind of history personally?
Yeah, so I've been playing live bands since I was like 16. You kind of get your first bands together and you start playing your first couple of songs at the time, whatever was relevant, when I was younger. Maybe the likes of Arctic Monkeys and the Raconteurs and, then playing some classic rock, like, the old Thin Lizzy classics. And that'd be kind of the first bands you'd be in, and you'd play all like the local town stuff and play all the local gigs. Then I moved to Dublin when I was 18 for college, and I met up with other musicians there. Funnily enough, the first band I was in, I was buying an amplifier of someone who became a very close friend of mine, who's a singer in one of the bands I joined. And he just invited me along and said, we're looking for a guitar player if you want to, show up. I did, and I ended up being in that band for a few years, and we played everywhere that would have us, and really enjoyed that. And actually the bass player that was in that band is the bass player that's currently with us now. So there you go. That's kind of one of those, you find someone and then you hold on to them and you just don't let go.
What kind of got you interested in music yourself then? Like, what were you kind of sort of emulating, and kind of what made you want to pick up a guitar? What made you want to sing?
Oh, that's a really great question. I guess I blame my dad probably for the music thing. It's his fault. He used to have these classic rock LPs that he used to play on rotation. Back in the days, you're talking like old Led Zeppelin records, Black Sabbath, AC/DC, just constantly on rotation all the time. And I got really obsessed with Led Zeppelin in particular, Led Zeppelin 4 being the one that he put on all the time. And I suppose it just kind of grew from that. I remember he had I think it might have been a tape, like a VHS tape of Song Remains the Same, which is like a live concert from Zeppelin, and I used to watch that as a kid and go, well, Jimmy Page is like the coolest guitarist ever. And that's literally the only interest I had was guitar. So learning guitar at the time. I went begging and I said, I'll cut the lawn for the next 10 years if you buy me this guitar, At the time, there was none of the stuff that is kind of available to musicians now, like you could go on the internet and learn from a ton of YouTube videos and, instructors that are available online. At the time, you literally had to go into somewhere like a guitar store and learn how to play the instrument. So that's what I did. I learned from the local guy, learned all the basic chords and Wonderwall and everything else that you had to learn, at the time.
Did you start with, acoustic or electric?
Oh, absolutely acoustic first. Yeah. So I used to have this really, I think my mother bought my first guitar for me, and it was like a 3/4 size nylon string
Okay.
It'd be a stretch to call it a guitar per se,
Yeah.
but
I had one of
yeah,
them. That was like my first one too.
I think it's a rite of passage. I think it's
Yeah.
like you have to have one of these guitars that you just can barely tune.
Well, it's
Uh,
economical because like they were like the ones I could afford with my own money because they were like 50 quid or something. So it was
yeah,
like it was handy to have.
exactly. And I remember my mother at the time being like, you know what, you've picked up a lot of stuff and dropped a lot of stuff because you're at that age, you're trying to figure out what works for you. Like all you pick up all these interests and hobbies and then you just drop them 6 months later. So at that
Yeah.
point, she was just like, this is just another thing. You're just going to pick it up and you're going to drop it. So you know what? I'll get you one, but it's going to be within budget. And then I had to prove myself. I had to go into the lessons. I had to learn the songs. I had to, basically show that this is something I'm going to keep before I went begging for my first electric guitar.
Then when you made the transition to electric guitar, did you find that because like you get comfortable, at least it's my experience, but you get comfortable kind of with acoustic and you're like, okay, I know the chords, I know kind of how to play a little bit. So you kind of graduate to electric guitar and then there's like, you have to worry about things like tone and the amp and like, making sure there's just a lot more to consider. And then obviously, effects pedals come into the mix and stuff. And then it's like, there's just a lot you have to kind of concern yourself with now in terms of the tone you're trying to create. I found it very disheartening when I got my first like electric guitar and I just could not replicate any of the tones that I heard on the music I was listening to. Yeah, I was wondering what your kind of experience was with that.
It's a lifelong journey and I'm still learning. And I think it's getting even more complex than it was back then, like with all the digital modelers that are out now. So,
Yeah.
like I play around with them, the Helix stuff, which is even more intricate than it was back in the day. You got to worry about things like EQ. I never had to worry about EQ back in the day. I just had everything, dialed to 10
Yeah.
and leave it at that. It's fine. So it depends on how deep you want to get into it. I wish I was sort of one of these musicians who don't obsess over this stuff because I think it can actually interrupt the whole point of playing music if you get too finicky about things like that. But yeah, like when I got my first, proper electric guitar, it did not sound the way I wanted it to sound, that's been a lifelong journey. I remember buying my first pedal and I was like, this is muddy. It's just not doing what it's supposed to do. And the frustration that was kind of, is it my playing? Is it something I'm doing wrong? But you just have to keep at it, you just have to keep playing, keep learning. And over time, it's like, well, it's not me actually, there is the gear. And I totally, wholeheartedly blame guitar magazines. You probably remember them from back in the day as well. The likes of Total Guitar and Guitarist. And you see these amazing, like, you just drool over the guitars. Like, you just be like, oh my God. And then you learn kind of what your heroes were playing and why they sound that way. And then the cost attached to them.
Yeah.
And that's a dream, of course, is kind of getting to own one of these. So that's been like a lifelong thing for me.
Then when it came to kind of Riserfall, how do you think this band kind of like differed maybe in comparison to other projects you were involved with?
So I personally feel like every band or project by its very nature is going to be super different because it is the kind of accumulation of every single person in that room.
Yeah.
So if you go into a room with 3 other folks, it's going to sound entirely different to what this band would sound like. And even through the last couple of years where, like I said, we've done a couple of different changes with, our own members, each one has sounded different and brought new stuff to the table. So I think, music in general, it's just a case of, well, what is everybody bringing? What's their tone? What's their attitude? What's their expression? And that's what's really interesting about music. It's a collaborative thing. It's like music is not like an isolated experience for the most part, particularly if you're playing in a band. There's so many pieces to it. And then you go beyond the actual playing of the music to production. And then it's who the producer is that you're working with and what they bring to the table. And, you collaborate with them and then you come in with an idea and they cook it and it sounds even better than what you thought it could be because they can hear something else. So yeah, it's everything is different. It's always different.
Yeah, and because I know, with this project, there's like a huge kind of grunge influence. In fact, I see in the vocals, I see a lot of rather, I hear a lot of kind of Chris Cornell. I hear a lot of Lane Staley, and there's that kind of grunge overtone to it, and it is a very eclectic mix. I mean, it feels like it really feels like it reminds me of listen to like a teenager's record collection kind of comprised into one project. Yeah.
I'm thank you so much. That's like a huge compliment to be even told that you can hear that through what I do. I'm not a singer per se. Like I said, I grew up and I play guitar, and I've only recently, in the last 5 years, tried to add vocals to, my offering with bands. Um, that's been a journey in itself, learning how to try and sing and contribute that. Singers are hard to find. They're really, really difficult to find.
Yeah.
So, if you can't find one, then you just have to try and do it yourself. And yeah, they are definitely kind of the guys who, I've looked to over the decades of listening to music and creating music and gone, I really like what they do. It's always raw. It's always emotional. There's always melody. That's my style. I play, okay, it's hard rock and metal maybe, but I feel like I have to approach everything in a melodic way.
Yeah.
And I think that's coming off the back of listening to those guys for sure.
And yeah, what's interesting is like you were talking about it, like it's melodic, but it's also very gravelly too. It's this very like beautiful mix of kind of I think like with the grunge kind of vocals, the kind of popular grunge vocalists, we also if you want to bring people like Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder as well, there's this there is this kind of concern for melody and for harmony, but like also it's not pretty necessarily. It's very flawed, purposely flawed. Yeah, and I think that's like something that it's actually quite approachable as a vocalist, especially kind of when you're learning vocals, because I think I don't know, it's hard to explain, but like because I've been in bands where the singer's kind of been like that. Sometimes I've done like backing vocals and stuff and kind of been emulating that style. And what I think is like interesting is that like it's easy to kind of replicate, but it's hard to master, if that makes sense. It's not, you still have to have an understanding of tone and an understanding of how to use your voice. You know what I mean? What was that journey kind of like for you?
I'd say for anybody in the room, it was a tired experience for working with me.
Yeah.
I remember like going to rehearsal rooms up in Dublin just by myself for a long time and trying to emulate, people who do that sort of broken, gravelly type of tone. And I would say there were people calling, the guards going, what's going on there? This is a wellness check. I just need to make sure they're okay in there. So like, I apologize to every neighbor I've had for the last 5 years because they've had to tolerate me trying to find something in there. But you're 100% correct in that, like the approach for me is always to, emulate those guys who aren't perfect. The tone is not super clean.
Yeah.
That's definitely kind of, my own personal style. I've tried to do covers of different acts, trying to find how they do it, even like the likes of Bon Scott or whatever, and trying to figure out how does he deliver that, or Brian Johnson, any of those classic rock vocalists, how did they do that thing? And of course, Chris Cornell being a huge one, for that. Yeah, it's been a process. I still consider, where I'm at now to be very foundational in terms of my delivery, and it's something I'm really excited to work on for the next year.
Yeah,
seeing if I can build on the work that I've done so far, and do something interesting.
the question is actually, do you find that the kind of music by the band is set by your vocal tone, or is it more so the band has like the kind of instrumentation and you're trying to match their tone?
I think that's really interesting. That's a really interesting question. I think the first thing that happens, I can only talk you through kind of the process as I see it. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, aside from somebody bringing a song that's already kind of, ready to go, the process is usually I'd write a riff. So, the riff in particular, this new single that's coming out, Claim the Kingdom, mm-hmm. It was a riff before it was anything else. And the riff was inserted into many different versions of what the eventual song ended up being. So, I'd send it over to the lads. The lads would say, oh, not great. Send it back. All of that, the vocals were not even in consideration at that point. It's finding the song, so the music tends to come first, and that kind of, to an extent, dictates the attitude of the vocal. So I would say, yeah, it's riff first, and then we find it in the song, and then we say, okay, well, the vocals have to match that. Then, that's just my process anyway.
Well, actually, you mentioned the new single, Clear the Kingdom, and what I think is interesting when I was listening to it is that I think personally this is your most sort of brutal, most heavy song yet. I mean, a lot of your songs prior to this kind of follow the sort of structure of kind of quiet versus loud choruses kind of, and this one just seems like from the beginning, it's like brutal. It's like the tone is set from the beginning, and it kind of maintains that for the entire 4 minutes of its time. Yeah, I was wondering if maybe you could talk a bit about the kind of musical change in this song, and kind of just what the song's about in general, because I don't want to impose interpretations.
For sure, for sure. So with that particular track, I guess it's growing in confidence, and I think that's been part of why I'm so excited about this track in particular. We've kind of been on a journey to try and find what do we sound like, and one of the things that I would listen to, our back catalogue and kind of feel is that we haven't quite found how we sound. Mm-hmm. I think this new single is the first time we sound like how I hear, us sounding long term. Like, this is it. We found kind of the approach. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm so excited about this particular release. It's the first time I felt like each member of the band has found their rhythm, has found their groove, has found their particular place in the music. And I think that just comes from time. It's just playing with the guys, figuring out what each person brings to the table, what each person is capable of, and working on it. It's been a great process, and this is the way it's going to go, forward as well. So obviously I know what the next single is going to sound like and the single after that, because we have all that stuff written, and this is the direction it's going, so it's fantastic to hear coherence, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. It's fantastic to hear coherence within what we're going to do, in the future.
What's the song about, like, in terms of the lyrics then?
Yeah, so again, this is just, again, it's open to interpretation. I don't like, forcing someone to take out of a song, because I listen to like old classic songs, and they mean different things to different people. And I love that. I love that music is open to interpretation. Yeah. It's one of those beautiful things. From my perspective, it was mostly just about disillusionment, with kind of everything that is around you, the structures that are there to support you, but they weren't necessarily built for you. Okay. So it's kind of like just kind of avoiding falling into empathy, or, avoiding kind of being disengaged with everything, and instead kind of attempting to put your foot down and kind of saying, you know what, let's take back a lot of the control over that. Let's place people there who we want in these sort of positions. So that can mean anything. And I mean, if you want to apply it to, if you work in the corporate world, you can talk about, politics, you could talk about anything. So
we'll leave it vague.
apply to whatever suits.
And then, like, you're kind of mentioned that this kind of like setting the tone for where you want to go forward. I mean, obviously for the last I think about 3 years, you've been consistently releasing singles periodically. Now, do you think it is kind of the time to have consideration for a larger release, be it an EP, be it an album, or are you still just kind of content to do singles for the meantime?
It's a funny question, because it depends on kind of what the music industry wants right now. And I'm not convinced they still want, let's say, albums or longer EPs. I'm not sure, like, obviously the plan for us right now is to release single after single after single, group them together, put them into an EP, which we will launch next year at a launch gig in Dublin. So the idea right now is just to release, and then group them together and put them out then. Yeah, it's just the music industry has changed and it's evolved. Like, if you were to ask this question 10 years ago, we wouldn't have released a single by single by single. Yeah. No way. Like, you'd wait, or you'd put out an EP, or even an album if you could. But yeah, it's changed so much, and you know yourself, like, it's all about being consistent with releases. That's kind of what you have to do these days.
Yeah, that's true, because like it's a very strategic thing where it kind of keeps you in people's mind when it's like a new single every couple of months. It's like, oh yeah, I like this band, I'm going to listen to it. Whereas if you put an album out, it's kind of like a one and done, and it's like, I'll hear them again maybe in like a year or something. So it kind of keeps you in people's mind, but like with the perpetual kind of releasing of singles.
Exactly. And I mean, there's pressure with that as well, because you have to, queue up these singles for release every couple of months, every 3 months if you can. And with that, then there's all the content creation side of it, which we didn't have to necessarily worry about when I was much, much, much younger. Yeah. So it's a whole new ball game for bands, and I see it constantly, about how particularly independent artists have to go out and do all this stuff themselves, Yeah. So they have to decide on their content release schedule, put all the effort into the music and the production, and mastering and all that side of things. But then they also have to create all the visual content because that's super duper important. And then they have to worry about once they've all that visual content there, like the music video, and the reels and all this sort of stuff, they also then have to promote it constantly on their socials. It's not easy. It's really not easy.
It's never ending. And like, that's every musician now is doing that. Like every musician. Yeah. Cause it's like, it's not enough just to play music anymore. It's like, you have to do everything. You have to do like the social media management. You have to do, the PR. I mean, there are like obviously, avenues to go to kind of help. And I actually think one thing that's kind of cool about the metal scene in Ireland is that, although heavy metal might have the kind of idea of it being sort of more of a countercultural sort of specific thing, I don't think there's like a pocket in Ireland that doesn't have some interest in metal. Like metal bands can tour the entire nation and have people turn up. It's very. I forget which band it was, but I saw. I was following, like, I think it was a British metal band who were touring Ireland, and they were doing like a pretty extensive tour, and it was just cool because like they were playing these like really weird spaces and like just pubs or just like social clubs or whatever. And it was really cool because like it was just like there was always people there. It's not just like in the big cities. And even though you think like a metal is perhaps a bit more of a niche genre, even though it has mainstream appeal, like you go to something like Download Festival, it's just packed, or Rock am Ring, or one of these like big, Hellfests or whatever across Europe. It is obviously a massive genre, and I think like it's kind of cool, like in Ireland, that it kind of affords you a lot of opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. And Ireland in particular has a like plethora of amazing metal bands, rock and metal. We're so lucky. One of the highlights of last year was the return to gigging and getting to go out and gig again, and the amount of friends that you make along the way, other bands who were absolutely incredible. You learn so much, you learn so much just by watching these other bands, and it's such a welcoming, community, I guess, is, so if somebody's putting on a show, you get the call, do you want to support? Or, if somebody's doing like an event, so definitely there's like a massive Irish metal and rock community. So we're blessed, really. I think as well, the fact that rock and metal for a long time, I felt kind of subsided with the mainstream, like it wasn't really the popular thing. And I can really see a resurgence happening, where it's crossing over again, where there's this kind of new kind of metal wave, I guess, happening. And it's incredible. It's incredible to see.
I think it's actually an interesting thing in the Irish kind of festival scene that there's such a void for like a metal festival here, because every country in Europe has it pretty much. And it's like, you see like when a band like, say, for example, Metallica plays here, they can just play like Slain, or they can play, and I know they're one of the bigger examples, but like, there's so many bands who sell out like the arena and stuff like that. Like you could totally put on like a 50,000 person gig and have it sell really well. And then that's not even including people who travel over from like the UK and mainland Europe to see it as well. I always think that's like a really huge void that kind of the bigger promotion companies are kind of missing out on. And it's not something that kind of smaller promotion companies, and there's great metal promoters across this country, but just realistically not feasible. You'd need millions of euros to be able to do it. But yeah, I always thought that was like just such a weird kind of gap in the market.
Yeah, I was hoping there was a festival announced a couple of years back, Sunstroke, I think was
Sunstroke, yeah.
And it seemed to be
no
like
more.
Yeah, so that was, I felt like that, oh great, like that's going to fill that gap. But then that kind of dropped off the face of the earth during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was
like
unfortunate because COVID happened, and then they just never tried to re-bring it back. Yeah, it's strange because Sunstroke was a festival back in the 90s, but it was more like just kind of an alternative rock festival. They only did it, I think, 2 years, and then they announced it. It was great. It was like it had basically a download lineup. But it makes sense, like, because like, you look at something like Electric Picnic, and they kind of start around the same time as Reading and Leeds, so they just kind of like nick a bunch of artists from that. You could totally have a festival here that's around the same time as Download, and just nick some of their performers for that, or Hellfest, or any of these like festivals across Europe. I mean, these metal bands are on the continent, and then obviously local acts, give them the opportunity to play as well.
Somebody's missing a trick there.
It really is.
Really?
It's like so massive.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So I think I've asked everything I have to ask. I guess one final thing I'll just ask you is kind of like, what's the band's kind of future plans? What's your kind of aim and goals, and what do you have coming up, I guess?
Yeah, so we're super excited to again keep releasing new tracks. Hopefully every 3 months for the next while. Um, the idea is that we do package them all into an EP for a launch gig in May in Dublin. Um, that'll be kind of the first real kind of headline show we've done. So we're super excited to get that all locked in. We should have more information on that kind of hopefully for the next release. Um, Again, we'd be turning our eye further afield. We'd want to play the UK. That's kind of a short-term goal of ours as well, short to medium term, is get over and play some of those amazing venues that, we see a lot of fantastic metal acts play. So putting together a tour in the UK as well would be a great way to kind of start 2024.
Actually, what's kind of cool though, being from Ireland, is that even though it's like an island nation, we're like our proximity to both the mainland and the UK is like just pretty much perfect for like touring artists in a way. Like, it's not like we're Iceland where we're very isolated and it's difficult to get to. It's like, we're actually kind of right in the middle. It's like, a couple of hours on a ferry either way, either to France or Spain or to the UK. And it's like, so I think it's like such a feasible thing to do, like for Irish acts to actually get over to the UK and vice versa.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think, Ireland has a extremely long history of, people going abroad to play shows and expand their networking base and their fan base, in other countries. We tend to do that really, really well. We tend to export things fairly well because, there's always a market for, something as long as it's good.
Yeah.
But I do agree that internally, we could definitely put on something massive for, the Irish bands here that have been working so hard, and something like a Sunstroke would be awesome.
It'd be kind of cool. I'm just thinking this now, actually. But if you get like a collaboration of Irish like metal acts and then bring them to the UK and bring them to Europe as like a package sort of thing, so like it's like see 5 Irish bands in one night or some shit. I don't know.
Oh, sign me up!
That'd be sick. I think like someone should get on that. Maybe I'll do it.
Someone has to earn. No pressure.
Yeah. I'll get right on that. Thanks very much for your time, and I really appreciate it. And best of luck with the single.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate coming in and chatting.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We hope you enjoyed and stay tuned for more.